The war in Nagorno-Karabakh was carnage. 6 weeks in which a deluge of fire and steel fell on the breakaway region and its Armenian forces. 40-year-old Raik was one of the last to die in combat.
He died saving the wounded. He was getting them loaded into a vehicle when they were hit by a Grad missile.
The losses to Armenian forces were severe. Over 2,400 soldiers lost their lives, targeted by new generation weaponry. Many of the survivors are set to carry reminders of combat for the rest of their lives.
This young man is paraplegic. He's 19 years old and he's paraplegic.
Elise Bogosian is a French-Armenian aid worker. She went into action at the beginning of the conflict to help with the wounded.
This one is 18. He was wounded in the skull and lost his sight. This one was the driver of a truck that was transporting soldiers when a drone targeted them.
Most of the enlisted weren't professional soldiers, but young adults drafted in, or volunteers wishing to protect their home.
They were first-year students in law, philosophy, in economics. They were language and architecture students. There were also musicians and artists. A lot of people volunteered.
With little direct fighting between each side, death fell from the sky instead. Artillery strikes, drone attacks all uploaded online in high definition. Aided by its Turkish ally, Azerbaijan had technical superiority well beyond what the Armenians could muster, with state-of-the-art munitions proving little match for 20th century arms.
This war, where weapons were constantly falling out of the sky, it put them in a strange psychological state that they weren't trained for. It was also a huge shock for them, because in the trauma is this powerlessness. They didn't actually fight.
For many in Yerevan, there was worse still. Azerbaijan had apparently strengthened its onslaught with banned weapons.
This one was wounded with cluster bombs.
Cluster bombs, a kind of submunition that scatters over a wide area when the warhead carrying them detonates in the air and destroys everything in range. Some, though, don't explode, leaving a lasting danger across zones that have been targeted. Because of their imprecise nature and the risk they pose to civilians, they're banned under international law. Elise is working with Artziv, a French-Armenian doctor documenting alleged breaches of the rules of war.
You see the debris? I'd like to get hold of them.
The debris comes from thousands of ball bearings projected at force on detonation. Some models explode in mid-air. Better to strike the upper parts of a human body.
There you've got the wound to the skull, and you've got the shrapnel too.
The military hospital's director is helping them with their investigation, taking tissue samples from the wounded to send to Europe for further analysis. He thinks Azerbaijan used at least 2 banned weapons in Nagorno-Karabakh.
I didn't see them used on the ground, but I can certify their effects here. The patients who have come here have all been wounded by the same kind of illegal weapons, cluster bombs or phosphorus.
At a Yerevan burns unit, staff can hardly believe their eyes.
We've had a lot of burnt patients, but never with wounds like this.
It's thought these soldiers could have come into contact with white phosphorus, a highly incendiary substance that ignites on contact with the air.
It's extremely deep. It goes right down to the bone and eats it. He's burnt everywhere. It goes right through the clothes.
It's really characteristic of a chemical or phosphorus weapon.
This footage from Armenian television shows what's thought to be phosphorus falling on a forest in Nagorno-Karabakh. It's a formidable way to burn through vegetation, and the Armenian forces using the trees for cover. Artiv is one of many doctors from Armenia's diaspora who came during the conflict to help. He treated dozens of wounded soldiers and often noticed odd burns.
They really aren't like what you would call classic burns.
There are other factors too. Wounds that seem under control, which then take an abnormal turn for the worse. Problems with metabolism, unexplained heart attacks. All are issues known to come from phosphorus burns. This French surgeon has been scanning through patient files.
I can't yet give a formal answer, but it does seem like they're suffering from serious metabolic issues, which is common with chemical burns. When you get a chemical burn from certain compounds like phosphorus, you get issues with ions in the blood, which means falling calcium levels and serious cardiac problems. In any case, it's possible that these aren't physical burns from flames.
While the use of phosphorus isn't banned under international law, its use is tightly regulated under an international agreement that neither Azerbaijan nor Armenia have signed. However, a number of NGOs have demanded its prohibition for years, given its brutal effects. This man presents all the signs of a white phosphorus attack. His wounds haven't yet been cleaned, and Artiv is taking samples in the hope of finding traces of the incendiary weapon's use.
Certains vont tremper dans du sérum et je vais les prendre avec moi en bagage à main.
Ultimately, the tissue samples will be analysed in labs and sent to both NGOs and international bodies.
Since this is all going to be documented, we can move on to the next step, proving that this is about war crimes, and those are reprehensible.
The investigation is moving at pace.
Take a picture of that.
Armenia's public prosecutor has allowed both Elise and Artiv to look through the forensic police archives.
Ça, c'est la fragmentation. Tu vois les billes qui sont rentrées? Tu vois, il n'y a que les tissus qui ont brûlé. Ça peut être du phosphore.
Et même regarde son visage.
Oui, je te dis ça peut être du phosphore.
Est-ce qu'ils ont acheté ça?
Ça, c'est occidental, c'est pas russe.
For hours, they pour through hundreds of photos of suspicious munitions, of ruined faces, of the charred bodies of Armenia's war dead.
They cut off his ear. It's a Turkish tradition to spread terror. They cut off the ears, the limbs, the head. This time they've cut off his ear.
Videos purporting to show such acts have spread over social media. Azerbaijan denies it all, in turn accusing Armenia of committing war crimes itself. Elise, for her part, is headed back to France with a trove of evidence.
All of these debris were pulled out of bodies. We'll see.
The guns have fallen silent as both sides count their dead, but now a new front has opened, with NGOs fighting to lift the fog of war and reveal exactly what happened over 6 weeks of conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh.